I had such an epic day yesterday that it was just like a 10 out of 10 day that I don't even really want to talk about. The topic that I wanted to discuss today, because like in comparison, just really not as fun or as cool. And today's topic that I had in mind wasn't as necessarily like a positive or a negative thing. It was just a thing, and it wasn't as fun as yesterday. But yesterday was like just an absolutely magnificent day. And what I think is so interesting about it is, there were things that happened throughout the day that like wasn't really fired up about. Work has been interesting lately. Some challenges there. Couple of little projects that I've been working on here kind of stalled out and hitting some roadblocks with. So a little bit puzzled at those. But then, yesterday was living in Colorado was bonkers. So the morning was like, the day got up to 70 degrees. The morning was beautiful. Took the dogs out. You're running, you're biking with the dogs. Always drastic, awesome scenery out here. Great sunrise, and then had the day. And buddy from the gym, member there, also starting to coach there. He, Big Mike, he takes his dog and they go, they'll go skinning or snowshoeing up a ski run or out in the backcountry and then ski down. And he's been chatting about it for a while. And it's something I've wanted to do for a while. And there's always little excuses to kind of block you from doing it. Oh, it's the drive, the time, whatever. And so he finally was like, hey, do you want to go this week? And anyway, the long story short is it was amazing, and the day was insane, right? 70 degrees during the day, outside running, playing with dogs, and the nighttime on a ski mountain, skiing with the dog. Absolutely wonderful. And it's cool. Like you get to exercise. We, snowshoed up, took the pack off, threw the boots and the skis on, ripped down with the dog. My buddy has a dog. It was and it was crazy seeing how happy the pup was. And just kind of following me around and sometimes running too fast because he's never run downhill before like that. Just blown away at like the snow. And there was a group that got to the top before us. And it looked like he had, this guy had a pit bull mix, really pretty dog. Just like that like brown gray with the white, really nice dog. And they were bombing down and this dog was like full sprint down the hill. And watching, my dog watch this go down, it like melted his little brain. I feel like he had just seen something that he had never thought possible, but understood what it was. It was very cool. But yeah, 70 degrees in the day, skiing in the afternoon. Like, I don't know what to say about that. And like I said, there were these little things that happened throughout the day that I was pretty frustrated with. But, my focus was on both the epic morning and the epic evening. And it is crazy how in so many cases you can become your focus. And I could have let that day go really sideways, been annoyed at the drive out, felt like, I got to get all this gear, dig all my gear out. This is cumbersome, blah, blah, blah. I have these other things I need to be doing. I don't need to be out here doing this, but it wasn't that. It was just like be in this moment. Can't wait to do it again. So always a fan, don't, when possible, try not to keep kicking that new thing you want to do down the road. Because even if it's not, your favorite thing, this was some of the most fun things I've done in my entire life, hands down. Even if it's not your favorite thing, you'll learn something from it and keep being able to find those things that you love, that are really exciting. So, yeah, 5-star day, 10 out of 10. 2 thumbs way up. Can't say enough good about it. Could just keep repeating just different superlatives about how freaking awesome it was for the rest of the podcast. But what did I want to get into? I wanted to get into, and I know I've talked about this before. It's something that just is like really on the forefront of my mind, because when I see it occur in small teams or in relationships or in my interactions with other people, when I do it, I get really curious as to why it happened. And I heard once, someone said the why questions will kill you. And sometimes you just got to ignore the why and keep moving forward on the how and the what. But, it was really about this tension between being positive, inspirational, constructive, productive, and pessimistic. So, and I think, what someone once said to me, I think like the crass way to lay this out would be like, don't polish a turd, the lipstick on the pig analogy. But Because I do think it is really important when maybe you had a goal, and in assessing, whether or not you met that goal, let's say you didn't, and let's say you missed it by, it doesn't really matter, a little bit, a medium amount, a lot, and you stop focusing on the fact that you missed the goal, and you just turn all your attention to, well, here are all the things that went well, and that's it. Which I don't think it's a bad thing to do, or a non-productive thing to do. That is focusing on all of the things that went well along the way. But maybe they are these minorly, if contributory at all, factors. I was like, the way I said this today is like, I don't know, maybe you wanted to like drive to the grocery store, and instead of driving to the grocery store, you turn out of the driveway and you just like crash the car into 15 mailboxes and, ditch it at the end of the street. And, but you turn around and, you say like, well, the air conditioning and the temperature in the car was just fantastic. And I had the best song on, like these really non-essential factors. And you're like, yeah, but the thing that you wanted to be successful at, you like missed by 10 miles. So just kind of focusing on these non-essential things. And what I'm trying to think through is from like a me sharing this and me trying to generate this, I don't know, ideology is not the right word, and I don't like the word culture or environment, but to try to push this concept forward of like, how do you stay constructive and being realistic, but also being inspirational and positive? Because there are challenges there, right? Like I definitely have worked with people in the past and been on teams with people in the past, competed with people in the past. Actually, I won't say not so much, very rarely competing. Actually, in CrossFit, I was very fortunate, and this is kind of where I really started latching onto this idea. I was so blown away, and they didn't always talk about it a lot, which I thought was really interesting. But I was always so blown away with some people about how just unafraid they were to identify what they're bad at and just go work on it. And it was really interesting, especially when I was competing in CrossFit. There wasn't really even this like long discussion of like, hey, what do you do well? What do you not do well? It was just autonomous people. And for me, I feel like this is a signifier of a high performer. They didn't really need to discuss this shit in committee. It was like we'd do a workout, maybe a team workout, and you'd see one person really blew it on this movement. Maybe they sucked at muscle ups, or they had the weakest lift. And there wasn't this like discussion of, hey man, like here are some drills to do the muscle ups. They just went off and did that shit on their own. They figured it out and they came back better. And you trusted them to come back better. You saw them clearly working on it. But there was no like, hey, let's recap. And I feel like that's a pretty, and recaps are good as a group, because it's, being able to share that vulnerability with the group is an important, I think, characteristic too, if you want to be a successful team or whatever. But that was something I noticed there, was like, we didn't even really have to talk about it. People just went and did their own thing, held themselves very accountable, did so in plain view of others, and just got to work. And I think when you're at that point, for me, I'm biased, obviously, like that's a sign of a high performing team or group or dynamic. And the flip side of this is, maybe you're going through the workout and, the goal is the last movement of the workout is muscle ups, and, a team member really screws it up, and then you finish the workout and you just focus on everything else you guys did well. That's where you can get stuck, right? Because you just want to make everybody's feelings feel nice. This was going somewhere. I might re-record this one. There's so many things I want to talk about with this, because I was also just talking to somebody on the Instagrams, and they were sharing something, I think from something they wrote about receiving help from others. And I think one of the things, when you want to help somebody, one of the things that's really important about that, and this I think is maybe one of the things that plays into what I'm discussing, is it's not easy to be uncomfortable. It's not easy to be comfortable with somebody else's discomfort. You see somebody else uncomfortable, experiencing discomfort, and that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, makes you feel discomfort, and you want to go fix that. And I think fundamentally this is a very wonderful, natural human response. You see somebody struggling with something, feeling challenged, and you want to go alleviate some of that stress. I think this comes from like a very natural, good space, a wanting to help. But the dangerous flip side to it is sometimes in pursuit of removing the discomfort, you might not actually help them with the thing that they need to have prolonged alleviation from the discomfort. You just might want to soothe, put a balm on their feelings a little bit so they just put a smile on, and then you don't have to deal with the fact that they're struggling. I can think of this in like a really simple way when maybe, you're trying to teach somebody something and you're watching them learn and they're having a hard time and you just go do it for them. And, there's a lot of downsides to that. Like then they just become dependent on you fixing it. Or, like another one is maybe somebody is having like emotionally a really challenging time and you just interact with them for a split second. You're not there for all the other minutes, hours, days where they're having this emotional hardship, but maybe you bump into them for a little while and you just want to do these tiny little things to make them feel better because you just feel uncomfortable in this 5-minute interaction, but you're not there to like really stick around and hear what they're going through and struggle with them through it, or just listen. And because maybe they don't need the help that you want to give them, maybe they need a different kind of help, and the help you're giving is just there really for you so you don't have to come face to face with their discomfort. This all boils down to the phrase of you got to be comfortable with their uncomfortable. And this is, I think for me, that is a good starting point to get to if you truly want to stick around long enough, not just to help somebody, but see if they want your help and then learn how they want to be helped. So I think that entire concept of like alleviating someone's discomfort, just so you don't have to also feel that discomfort, is being uncomfortable with their uncomfortable is maybe a place where like this idea of sugarcoating things comes from. You missed the mark, you failed the goal, but then you just want to pat each other on the back and only focus on the things we did well and not really address the shit that is in our control and could be better. So I've been really focused and preoccupied with this lately. And then a buddy of mine a while ago shared with me this concept. And I kind of just like heard it and we were chatting about it. It was called Goodhart's Law. And it states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Man, I was like, yeah, that's moderately interesting. Okay. But then lately, when I've seen this phenomenon pop up, been talking to people at things they've done, or maybe they were focused on a goal and trying to accomplish something, or maybe I've seen this pop up in groups I work with or teams I work on. People listening to people kind of evaluate their own effort. And it kind of stuck out to me as a little bit more powerful and meaningful than I originally first thought. So when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And I actually liked how Google summed this up. It said, in other words, when we use a measure to reward performance, we can provide an incentive to manipulate the measure in order to receive the reward. I think the example that Google had on there. So, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Maybe you measure somebody on how much of something is being made. Hey, we're going to measure, how many of these are being made, regardless of what the goal is. And then you get, a whole lot of something, but it wasn't quite exactly what you wanted. And so why I think this is good is you have a lot of different things that you can measure on your way to a goal. So for example, if I bring this back to the working out, maybe it's like I have a specific performance or a specific rank, or maybe let's say I want to qualify for a certain competition in CrossFit. And along the way, as you're getting ready to qualify for that competition and you're training, you're probably seeing improvements on stuff. Maybe you're like tracking, like you want to get better at wall ball shots or something, or you want to get better at air squats. And let's say you don't qualify for the competition, but you're like, well, I did 1,000 air squats and that's really cool. And that becomes your focus. Now that is really cool. That's a cool measure, but you became too focused on that target and you missed the goal. And if you only stop there and you just kind of focus on the smaller contributory measures, and then you start turning those into the goals, you can really derail yourself, and you can prevent yourself from looking at those things which you could have constructively focused on in order to get closer to that goal or actually get to the goal. But it's not an easy thing to do. And I do wonder so much why we default to this, especially in terms of where we miss the goal, kind of putting that soothing balm on ourselves of saying, well, we didn't make the goal, but we did this really, really, really well. And then we just stop there and we move, and maybe you then pick some external factor of why you didn't get the goal. Well, we did this really well, but that goal is really hard to get to. Well, that's why they're goals. They're not supposed to be easy to get to. But yes, this one I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially personally. How do I stay focused on this when I interact with others that I'm working with, maybe working on a team with? Is there a way that I can help, like I said, kind of create an environment where we are capable of doing multiple things at once, which is, hey, you should identify what you do well for the purpose of not over allocating resources to it, because you need to then take those resources and allocate them to the places where you suck or you messed up or you missed the mark, so you can then get to the goal. And I think when we set a goal out there, and some goals might be unrealistic, but we always need to, I think, really confidently look at where we fell short of that goal and why. And not just get stuck on, well, we didn't get the goal, but these things went really, really well. Yeah, that's where my brain's been stuck on that, and Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure, right? The measures are just some of the component parts along the way to reaching to the goal. It's risky. You lose sight of the goal when you make those little individual parts that you're measuring along the way, you turn them into the goal. So yeah, that tension there, I've been thinking about that one, the tension between, because you don't want to be the pessimistic person either. And I am definitely someone who's motivated by this. And I don't think it's a right or wrong, good or bad. I'm definitely someone who's like, I'll do something and I'm like, here's all the places you sucked. Go get better. I don't know. I don't really want that, I don't need the validating words of affirmation. I feel most validated and appreciated when people are like, oh, I want to go work with him or be on a team with him or interact with him because he's competent, because he's effective, because I can trust him to get X, Y, Z done. That's kind of personally how I feel. And so in order to get there, maybe that means I'm a quality time, sort of affection interaction person. But in order to get there, it's when I self-reflect on stuff, maybe to a fault, and I've had people say this before, and I'm like, yeah, okay, well, here's where we got to, but man, I screwed this up, and I could have done this better, and here's how I could have done this better. And not everybody reacts that way to that kind of stuff, and sometimes that's frustrating for me. But I can understand that there's no necessarily right or wrong, because I've also seen people who are more balanced and equally, if not more effective at being competent at tasks or achieving goals. And I really think there are times when shit goes off the rails that a little bit of optimism and inspiration is a really, really powerful fuel. But I think if you never stop, and if you're someone who's really optimistic, really inspired, this is always going really well, but you never stop and look at are we actually moving toward the target? That can be a little bit, false isn't the right word. That can misguide you a ton. Because you'd be like, well, I had a great time and I was really happy and we were charging forward and I feel inspired. But then you look back and you're like, well, Jesus, we never accomplished a single thing that we wanted to get to. So there's all just different extremes in there. But where my head's been at is, why does that happen? Why do we do that? And then, how do you, because I'd like to, how do you put forward some sort of ethos, environment where you can have a balance of constructive assessment that keeps moving you forward, but also gives, inspiration and optimism so people feel excited to work on, address the things they're not great at. That's probably it right there. How do you create an environment where people want to, most of the time, optimistically and in an excited way, work on the things that we suck on. So, all right, there we go. Way off the rails on this one. 20 minutes, good Lord. But yesterday, 10 out of 10 day. Today, going to be an awesome day as well. And there's a couple topics from this I want to dive into more, so they'll circle back around. But more tomorrow.